Hello. Okay, so today we're going to continue with the planets and we're going to do the sun. But Nicole did have some question about the moon from last week, so we'll start with that, and then we'll start with the moon through the sun through the houses. And Nicole, I lost your video, and I don't know if that's intentional.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll show. I'm pulling up notes. I always take notes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's not a problem. And then, so one of the questions that you had was the moon and giving other people, let me share the screen, the opposite sign. So let me bring yours up, and I think you're Pisces. Okay. So first of all, I just want you to know this is a strategy that I was taught by my own guidance. So if we look at first the psychology of the moon being our child, being the way that we view the world, sort of that matrix where we're looking for mom or caretaker or someone else to meet our needs through that sign, through that house, we end up giving away our power because the moon has no light of its own. So 4 major unmet needs, and I talked about those last class: safety, security, mostly the earth signs; protection, mainly the water signs; air signs is validation primarily; and love, the fire signs. So those 4 unmet needs is what we're trying to get satisfied, because none of us had that adequately satisfied as a child in interactions with other people. So if we position ourselves as a child, and there's a whole school of psychology or therapy model, I can't remember the actual model, but the guy who created it said that we're always in transaction: child, adult, adult, or child. So if you're your moon, you're constantly in a child transaction. You can't get your needs met, and you're surely not in a position of power, hence not having your light. So one of the ways to counteract this is to view this, that the moon sign and the house is for you to give your inner child what he or she needs, and then everybody else give them the opposite sign. Now, there's light aspects, obviously, and there's shadow aspects. So let's just start with yours, since you're posing the question. Your moon, excuse me, is in Pisces. So one of the aspects of the psychology of the moon in Pisces is that mother is the divine. Mother is the universal womb, or the universal consciousness. So when you give that power to things or people, you're taking it from yourself. So you reserve that for you, where you view yourself as that divine, or you view yourself, and in the 6th house, whether it's for your diet or your habits or your day-to-day, your work life, you pose yourself, which you do with one of the things is that you give the medicine, right? So you're doing that. But remembering that that is for yourself, that is for your inner child. For other people, give the Virgo. And Virgo in a high vibration is the sign of discernment. Be very discerning who you're going to put on a pedestal. Be very discerning who you're going to give power over to. And so this is where the discernment, or where you go a rational, logical relationship with the person, where your values lie, versus those people that perhaps you're going to trust in a spiritual aspect, let's say, since the sign is Pisces. So this is not something that's set in stone, but if you start learning the language of, or the key words of each of the signs, you can see how it becomes appropriate. And the highest word for Virgo is discernment. So who are you going to give that goddess power to, or the permission to meet your needs? Because in relationship, obviously, in friendships, in love, we want our partners and our friends to meet certain needs of ours, but be discerning about it. For yourself, you put yourself on the pedestal, you put yourself in that universal consciousness, you make yourself the divine and the divine feminine for yourself and your inner child. Everybody else has to be discernment or critical, thinking critically around who you're going to give this label or this power to. Does that make sense?
That makes so much sense. It's so helpful. And I think it points to one of the like primary patterns that I have been trying to like figure out with women.
Okay. So there's a relevance to allowing other people temporarily, right? That's the other thing. It's Earth. The Virgo moon, obviously opposite of the Pisces moon, is Earth. So it's for limitation. Anytime there is an Earth element, it is temporary, it is limited, it is finite. So let's say the 6th, let's say the 12th, think of that as unified consciousness, unraveling, allowing someone to be the therapist, right? That you're in the hands of a healer, let's just say 12th house. It's for a finite time. You're going to allow this person to perhaps guide you or lead your journey or walk side by side temporarily. It's finite. You're critical about it. You're discerning about it. That's another layer to that. And so besides getting this in the records when my guidance, educates me, it makes sense because if the moon is the aspect that keeps us in child, and the only child we are responsible for is our inner child, the only exception, I said this last week, is if you have a child 14 years or younger. That's the only exception to the rule. Spiritual law dictates, particularly for mothers, but fathers too, that your child is under your energetic or spiritual umbrella up until 14. At 14, they get their karmic baggage, what I call the spiritual infrastructure, and they start their own road. So that's the only exception to this rule. So if you're going to hand over your spiritual power or this universal consciousness or this divine feminine for a finite time, be very discerning, perhaps it's for a specific goal, then that's another way to look at that. So just keep in mind that the moon is always a trick because it always robs us of our power, of our light, and we want another to meet our needs. Now, I wrote Truth is in the Triangle. Truth is in the Triangle is a relationship book, and our relationship planets are Mars and Venus. However, when you're sick, you need a caretaker, the archetype of the moon. You're having a bad day. You want to be held. You want to be sort of childlike, right? Suck your thumb on the couch and let your partner nurture you. It's an appropriate time temporarily. So in that particular model, I use the overlap of the two circles of the Vesica Pisces. And in the center of the relationship, the couple decides what one need they're going to each meet for themselves. So if you extrapolate this into friendships, I have one very clear friend. She's like my body and money. She's like my earthly person. I've got one friendship that's all about my mental health and another one that's all about my emotional health. Like that's kind of like their need that they meet for me. So that keeps me very clear on how that relationship meets that particular need. It's not fair to expect that somebody or anybody meet all of your needs. So in a relationship, speaking about, and if you know astrology, it's one of the ways that you can work on the synastry or the combined chart is, the moon will tell you what that need is that you want that person to fulfill in you. And it's okay to ask for one need or one particular area. So that conversation or that distinguishing piece keeps you in control. You say, okay, for this temporary time or for this particular relationship, this is going to be the one need I'm asking. And that's okay. That's super fair. So just keep in mind the psychology is always that you're in child. So if you're in child, you get the short end of the stick, you don't get your needs met, you're not in a position of power. That's why the moon is reserved for you. And everybody else, the opposite kind of says, okay, we're in an adult transaction. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense and operates under the law of polarity and your whole like 48 to 52 coming into balance.
Yeah, and because the moon, in your particular case, you've got the Mars like me. And so, and so you're going to flip right? From this child to this warrior. You're going to go from the child aspect to let me fight, be conflictive, right? That's how you're going to exercise your adulthood, because you've got the opposition. I have the same too. And I noticed in my own psychology with this opposition, when I'm child, sucking my thumb on the couch, as I say, being, oh, I'm so hopeless, falling into that, then all of a sudden I put on my warrior suit and now I'm an adult again. And that's how I used to start life. And one day I'm like, I'm sick of struggling. I'm sick of this dynamic of I'm in child, I give away my power, and now I have to put on my warrior suit and get out there. So in your particular case, because you have the opposition like me, you're going to flip-flop. So really positioning the moon in the other sign for other people helps you to stop flip-flopping with that opposition. Now, not everybody has something opposite their moon, but because you and I have that, that's sort of how we move into the world to try to regain our power. And I don't know about you, but I got exhausted. I'm like, I'm done with this warrior, conflict. I gotta struggle. And I was like, no.
Yeah, that's been kind of up. And it can also express as the rebel archetype, which has a little bit of an adolescent nature to it.
Yeah, right. And it's my way or the highway, or I'm going to break all constructs and start fresh. And remember, the rebel, which is Uranus, and the creator, which is Mars, are related, because Uranus got castrated, and here's his little divinity, the circle, and it fell onto Earth. And this is the circle with the arrow is the creator, the divine purpose. So the rebel and the creator are found together. That's why we get this surge of energy. We go against the grain. We stay up all night, when we're producing or whatever, because those two work together. So that's a really good analogy of how when you get your creator and your rebel on, it's like you're trying to regain your adulthood. You're trying to get back your power. And I just got really tired of that. And when I really identified what I was doing with this opposition, I was like, no, I'm putting down the armor. I'm just going to stop being a child so much and just stay in my power and be more adulting, which is today's class of the sun. So any other questions about the moon, anything we covered last week that you heard that you need clarity around?
Nope, that was great. Thank you for really going into the detail of the practicalities.
Of course, my pleasure. Okay, so let's talk about the moon. I'm going to start with Jen's chart because she has a first house. I mean, the sun, I keep saying the moon. And I don't know if I have a chart for everybody of every house, but so here's the first house. My sister also has a first house sun. So Jen's chart's particularly interesting because her ascendant, which starts the birth story or life, immediately is the sun. So the sun is going to be, from an archetype, it's going to be the hero. So if you think of the house that the hero is in, you need to be the hero of that house. That's your story, is in that house. So somebody who has to be the hero of the first has to be the hero of their life, of their personality, of their body, of their perspective. And so it's a great placement in the sense that it's about me, but it can become very egocentric, obviously, because if your viewpoint is me, or my body, or my physical, or my personality, that can obviously create a more of an egocentric viewpoint. Now it's funny because in Jen's particular case, she has all of this in the house of the other in the 11th, that's going to be the two swings, like me, the other. It's almost like they're trying to balance each other out. And part of the incongruence is trying to find a way where her needs and the other's needs are met. But the first house is going to be a very egocentric view. It could be the firstborn. It could be that the center of the family, maybe you were the first grandchild. There's going to be a lot of focal point on that person in terms of themselves, their health, their body, their personality. The nature of the first house is just like the moon, I said last week that the moon changes with whatever needs you're trying to get. It's not that the sun in the first does that, because they don't change to get their needs met, but rather they make all the needs of the others about them. So it always is about them. It's always this take it personal focus. And so if I don't like how you're behaving, it's how is it affecting me? How is that thing that you're doing affecting me? And so me is a key word, and first house is Aries, and Aries is I am. So it's about me, the I am, the I am, the I am. I am the center of it all. So that's where the hero's journey is the focus. It's all about the me, the I, the ego, my thoughts, my life, how your action impacts me. So it becomes a very egocentric worldview. Now, these are the trailblazers. These are the rebels. These are people that are the head, not the tail. So there's obviously a pro. Now, let's look at, in this particular case, it's in Capricorn. This is a double-edged sword. The first house is ruled by Aries, and it's in the sign of Capricorn. Aries and Capricorn is probably the most potent combination in the entire zodiac. So people that have two of their big three, Aries and Capricorn, and ironically, and I'll just share this about Jen, her husband is an Aries and she's a Capricorn. That's a power couple. That's a really strong, potent combo. But the sun in Capricorn doesn't like to be in the first house because it's all about perspective. The 10th house, which is over here, I want to be able to be on the throne and see everything. So this is actually a position, the sun loves to be in the first house, but Capricorn prefers to be in the 10th because then it gets a bird's eye view of everything and they're in a position of power. You actually don't have so much power when the focus is always you, because then you miss out on all the other perspectives. So there's a double-edged sword there. So we're looking at not only the house that the sun is in, but also the sign. Does the sign like being it? So it likes being in the first because it's Aries, Capricorn power combo, very strong personalities, go-getters, trailblazers, ambitious as hell. It's all about them. That part's great. But there's a flaw in the psychology because their view is limited. They're not like the owl that gets the full 360. They're only limited like this. It's about me. And so that's the fall back. The deadly sin of the sun, no matter where you have it, is pride. And so there's a fall from grace no matter where you have the sun. There has to be.
Wait, you said the flaw of the sun is what?
Is pride.
Oh.
Deadly sin is pride. So if we look at the mythology, there's many mythologies about the sun, right? I mean, the Egyptian, obviously, that the sun god Ra, Jesus as the son of God. The sun, from the Greek perspective, there's a couple. First is Helios. So Helios is the sun god, and he has a son named Phaeton. And Phaeton didn't know his father. When Phaeton found out that his father was the sun god, he went to meet him. And Helios says to him, you can have any wish you want. I promise you anything. And he's like, I want to ride the chariot. The chariot is always, and you're going to see this repeated in mythology, the chariot is always what brings the sun across. And we see it in Egyptian mythology with the scarab that chases the sun every day. So you always see the dark is, the light follows the dark. This is a mythological interpretation you're going to see across. So for instance, in the Egyptians, when you see the scarab, that's the high vibration of the moon or Cancer, what follows it is the sun. I shared last week, Artemis is birth first, the moon, Apollo is birth after. So the shadow has to come forth, then the light can emerge. That's why we surrender to our dark or our lowest nature so that our divinity can emerge. Same thing with the Mars glyph. The divine is the circle, And the arrow means it needs a direction, but at a low vibration of this planet, it's ego, persona, personality. You honor the dark, then the light doesn't shine through and you don't come and live your purpose. So we see this mythology of the sun going across the sky. And Phaeton begs his father to drive the chariot. And his father's like, no, you're too young. You're not experienced enough. And he's like, but you promised. And Helios says, okay. And to his son's demise, Phaeton carries the chariot, crashes and burns the earth. And this is what happens when we don't have right use of our power. This is what happens when we have a grandiosity. This is what happens when we're too prideful. This is what happens when we don't have enough lived experience. So your sun, the house, is where you're going to trip and fall, trip and fall, trip and fall. Eventually, when you have some lived experience, a few times of failing, then you'll stand up. Then you're strong enough to ride the chariot and be successful. And so inevitably, we will fail where our sun is. The deadly sin is pride. And it's intentional. It should be. We should learn to manage our fire. So if we're too young and too inexperienced and too green and too raw, we might burn down the house, like Phaeton burned the chariot, burned earth. If we're old and we live in too much fear and we don't exert our power, then people step all over us. So the sun is where exactly you're learning that 48 to 52, to man your fires, Hestia, where she mans the agora, the fires at the agora. She can't go to any other cults. She can't go to any other temples. She is there and everybody comes to her. So that house, by sign and by house, is where you should man your fires, stay there, take care to manage that fire like a bonfire, not too much, not too little, Goldilocks. And life will constantly hit you in that house in order to teach you that 48 to 52, to man those fires. That's also your third chakra. So that's your power center in the astrology chart. Now, if your sun is afflicted, and we'll see more of that in level 2, then it might be harder. But if you have a positive sun, then it's a strength. The other thing, and I'll just speak to this with the sun and the moon, and we'll see this more in level 2. The relationship you have between your sun and your moon speaks to your rational mind. Your sun is your rational mind, your logical mind. In your story, it is your father. Whether you knew him or not, it does not matter. That is the father figure, like the moon is the mother figure. And it does not matter if you didn't have your mother on a pedestal and considered her the divine. That's how your psyche interpreted. And in your case, the 10th house sun is your father. He's on the throne. He's the king. He's the ruler of the kingdom, whether you knew him or not. It's what your psyche understood. So therefore, that's your logical nature. That's your rational mind. If your moon and your sun in your chart don't get along, you will have a sort of being ripped in two feeling. Your emotional nature and your logical nature will be at odds. You see that with an opposition, you see that with a quincunx, you see that with a square. If you have a trine or a sextile, and a conjunction can go either way, but it's usually positive, then those people, their rational and their emotional nature tend to flow a bit easier. So I always say that my ex-husband and I did nothing right, except we gave our kids the same element, their sun and their moon. My boys have it in both in fire, my daughter both in air. That's the only thing we did right. So my sun and my moon are both in water. So if they're in the same element, that part is positive. Yours, your sun and your moon are both in water. So that congruity of your rational and logical nature and your emotional nature is a plus. It's kind of like a plus that you get in terms of your psyche. But people that are ripped into, let's say a moon in Aries and a sun in Libra, they're constantly, their wholeness, their bodies, you have a physical body, a mental body, emotional body, those bodies are torn in two. And they spend most of the lifetime just trying to get their parts to get along. So we're kind of like, again, these are minutia of positives, but they all add up, right? So that's one of the positives when it's in the same element, or a sextile, which is the same polarity. And we'll get to that in level 2. The second house sun. So I don't know if I have my brother's chart here. The second house sun, inevitably, it does not matter what the person, I had a girl, she was a second house sun in Pisces. I don't think I have her anymore. Let's see. No. I got a new computer a while back and I lost a lot of good charts. No, I don't have it. Okay. So a second house sun is going to be somebody that is preoccupied with money, with financial status, with their things. Remember, I have. So if your fall from grace or your pride is linked to the I have, just like the first house is the I am, then they're probably going to get hit financially or feel they're never enough or feel like they never have enough until they learn to manage that, their identity, their fire, their self-worth, all words for the sun, is enough. So the biggest incongruence that you find with a sun in the second is when it's in like Pisces. So I had this client a few months ago. I cannot remember her name, and I would love to show the chart. But anyway, remember, she's a second house sun, Pisces. Pisces sun, Pisces moon, and a ton of stuff in Pisces. So the psychology of Pisces is otherworldly, the spiritual, not the material. And now the person's sun is in the house of material. That's an incongruence. And their entire psychology is to try to balance what is spiritual and what is material. That's going to be someone who needs to balance the spirit and the matter. If you have an earth sign, first of all, Taurus, obviously it's the house that rules Taurus, it's going to be fine. You're going to probably be very comfortable with things, with having money, be your God, be the sort of golden calf. You know, if you look at the levels of consciousness of Taurus, the golden calf, they're going to want to have, but probably they're going to end up losing. They're going to have loss after loss after loss. Think of the myth of Phaeton. So if they have to learn the lesson that they are not that, they are not what they have, then that's how it's going to probably play out, is by losing, because it's a house of money. And it's also a house of values. So what you value. If you put your value system in only the material, then what happens to your relationships? What happens to your spiritual life? And that's what they're going to get consistently hit until they find a way to balance the spirit and the matter. That's the biggest psychology of the moon in the second. The moon in the second, if it's something like Cancer, the moon in the second, I mean, the sun, I don't know why I keep saying moon today. The sun in the second also has a lot to do with attachments by sign. If it's a Cancer sun in the second, they're going to be attached to memories, to family, to low consciousness, to traditions. If it is a sun in the second in Leo, it's going to be attached perhaps to their pride, to their self-image, to what they wear, to how they walk into a room. So thinking of what the person values in themselves and what they're attached to, because the second house is about what I'm attached to. And so you'll see by the sun. Sun in the third. I had someone who's a sun in the third, but okay. Well, sun in the third tends to be somebody who very much values intellect, gossip, drama, low-level conversation, shallow conversation. Think of Gemini, okay? So they're the ones that can cite the details. They're the ones that need validation. They're the ones that want the facts. They might have a lot of rigidity to the way they think. They could be flexible in their thinking, but if they have to constantly make a point and be the smartest one and have the last word, it could get very exhausting. But they're the fact finder. They're the one that has to have all the details of the story. They're the ones that if you say, oh, you know, this space shuttle went out in 1973, they're like, no, 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 it's 1971. Like they're always going to fix that detail. So the intellect, remember, it's a K through 12 house. They also want to be the one that shines or has some power or is the most important in the siblings. The third house is a house of sibling rivalry. Sibling rivalry usually is when Mars is in the third. If someone has Mars in the third, there tends to be sibling rivalry created by the parents, in particular the mother. But a sun in the third can be the oldest sibling, can be the one, maybe it's a baby that got all the attention. But there tends to be a sibling issue or a sibling scenario when someone's a third house sun. They're very focused on the facts. They could be great school teachers. I have a girl, I think she's let me see if she's I think she's a third house sun. Oh no, she's a Jupiter in the third. So good school teachers, because they're that, you know, detailed with the facts and the science details and that kind of stuff, the structure of learning and things like that. That tends to be the issue. The father figure or the rational mind could be very much focused on negotiations, public relations, merchant, sales. So there's a nature that's very trickstery, either about the father or their rational mind. So I speak a lot about two types of power currency. There's the overt power currency and there's the covert power currency. A third house sun is going to be more covert. It's a little contradictory because if they're so focused on the facts, but their nature is covert in the sense that they've got that rational mind of manipulation, of low consciousness, of getting it. It's very Geminian sun. So they have a way of sneaking in and getting maybe their pitch heard or their attention seeking, because they're very verbose and they're very charismatic. So it has a manipulative sort of tendency to it, just like it's the ruler of the third house. So they're going to be very Gemini-ish. Probably the most difficult placement for a sun in the third is in Pisces, because Pisces is Neptune. It's the innocent archetype and it's very delusional. And then on top of that, you have a third house sun that's in Gemini or Gemini-ish. That's the trickster archetype. This is a person that believes everything they say. This is a person that's in their own self-deceit and in their own self-delusion. So that's when you start to see house and sign and how the layer of Gemini, which is Mercury or the trickster, and the layer of Neptune or the innocent, delusion and deceit start to not benefit the person. Okay, so just like the Aries Capricorn is that trailblazer, go-getter, original, that could, and ambitious, that could be a strength. A Gemini or a Pisces third house sun layer would be a lot of self-deceit. So you start to put the combination together. The fourth house sun, that's me. The fourth house sun is your focal point, is your home. So I've always been a homebody. I work from home. I teach from home. I do everything from my home. So my focal point will be not only the physical home, but my inner space. I'm extremely introspective. I'm constantly worried about the state of my soul, like to an obsession, right? It's always about like going inward. Oh my God, what does that say about me? You know, that sort of, you guys all know me, and I'm obsessive in this nature, but it's because of that fourth house. Think of it like the inner space. And the fourth house is your first home. So there's an essence to the womb there. There's an essence to the home life. So being home. And so not only the home that you create, and I've had a lot of hits when it comes to where I live, where is home. I've lost a lot of houses. I've moved 100 times, like that thematified tone, until I finally discovered the home is with me and where I am. And finally at this age, I'm starting to discover that home is with myself. So you see that thematic with fourth house suns. So now think of the layer. It's a Pisces with a Cancer feel. I don't appear very introverted, but that's an introverted space. It's because I have that Sag ascendant. I never shut up. But really, my essence is actually quite like, oh my God, protection on top of protection. It's a double water. And so it's always like, oh my God, I'm like this crab in this shell, double, introvert in the sense of my inwardness, because then I'll be safe when I actually go out into the world. And so it's a defense mechanism. And once I was able to get ahead of that, I started feeling more safety in the world, but there's a big need for protection. So now you're seeing Pisces in a Cancer house, double water, double need for protection. So you start to see also the needs that the psychology of that person has. And I definitely felt like that. And that's why I put the armor on when I was like in defense mode, because I had to protect myself because no one was there to do it, that kind of stuff. So you start to see how the whole chart starts to tell the same story. The sun in the fifth. So now you're having a double Leo. You're going to have a double ego, a double pride, a double personality. And the trick with the sun in Leo, kind of like the moon in Leo, I mean, the sun in the fifth, kind of like the moon in the fifth, and kind of like the Jupiter in the fifth. These people don't necessarily want to be parents. It's kind of like an incongruence in the message, because if it's the house of children, why wouldn't I want to have 100 children? No, you want to remain the child because it's the position of power with that particular house. So if you have a sun in the fifth in Libra, not going to like it very much, because now all the focal point is on me. I'm the most important child. I'm the end all be all, right? I'm Leo. I'm the sun in the house of the sun. And now I have to people please. So you start to see that incongruity. Now, fire signs and air signs get along because they have a polarity that's the same. They're both masculine polarity. That's why the nuances of the chart get deeper and deeper and deeper as we go. But even though fire and air get along, the sign of Libra doesn't want to share. It's just like having an Aries sun in the seventh house. Aries is I am. It doesn't want to be in the house of others or in the 11th house of others. So you start to see the nuances of that person's psychology. Okay, it's a fire house and I'm an air sign. Okay, I can rise. I could be the center of attention, but I don't like the nuance that I have to share nicely with others and play in the sandbox. That's where you start to see the idiosyncrasies of what the chart tells. And then if you add decanat and you add degrees, you can start seeing how specific this gets to like the exact essence of who we are. That's the beauty of obviously being a study for life. The sun in the sixth. The sun in the sixth has to have a routine. They need a day-to-day routine. They need structure. They need roots. So what sign do you think would hate to be a sun in the sixth?
Yeah, any of the air, Gemini, I would think would not want.
Well, Gemini wouldn't be terrible. I mean, it's not the greatest placement, but if in their intellectual capacity at work, if they're the star, and every day they get to go write or publish or edit or produce whatever that Gemini trickster or sell, they can do well there. Aquarius, rebel, no structure, no roots, in a house of daily routine. Pisces, similar to the Pisces sun in the second. Pisces that wants to float and be in la la land, having to be in an earth house that rules the body, structure, limits. this limitation. It's the itty bitty bit, that Aladdin saying I always say, phenomenal cosmic powers, itty bitty living space. Those are going to be the signs that don't thrive in those houses. So from a guidance perspective, part of our job is to help the client integrate the house and the sign. Where can they, in a day-to-day routine, 6th house, have roots, perhaps, and it's a sun in Pisces, let's just pick on that, that would be a really great placement for shamanism, because shamanic practice is all earth-based. And so now you're forcing them to be in the spirit, the Pisces nature, but in the earth practices. So that would be a way to guide them. So you start to find how you can satisfy the house and the sign when you're guiding them in terms of how they can live out their will, their purpose, their vocation. Those are all sort of ways for the sun to really evolve. So a lot of times people will naturally find their way because the sun is the sun is the sun. It's that thing that's guiding them, that divinity. But they may not have the nuances of how they can integrate the sign in the house. But most people are just sort of led to find a way to live out that sun, because that's where your whole life kind of takes place. The sun in the 7th. The sun in the 7th, obviously ruled by Libra, is going to be the house of others. So the biggest problem with the sun in the 7th is that the sun is of individual nature. And no sun, not even a Libra sun, but Libra may be the only one, wants to be in the house of the other. If the whole psychology of the sun is mine, me, I shine here, it's very hard to find a way to integrate. I'm looking for a chart that I have. I just don't know how I have her saved. I lost so many charts. Oh, I do think, oh no, she has a moon in the 7th. Let me check. I think it's a moon. Yeah, she's got a moon, but I just saw something that I can show you. I think this is the sun of hers that has a sun in the 5th. Oh no, it's a sun in the 6th. Okay, here's a sun in the 6th. So again, this is the sun in the 6th in Pisces. And this particular child of hers has severe depression. And so that's not uncommon. Pisces being a depression, melancholic sort of sign in the day-to-day, and 6 has to do with health. The illness isn't physical, but it could be in a low consciousness, some mental health or some depression issues. So again, anything to do with vitality, anything to do with health, anything to do with the body, anything to do with structure is going to be in the 6th. So the 7th being the house of the other, any sun that's in there, like I said, Libra might be the one that can most thrive, is going to struggle. And the entire question of that person's chart is, how do I stand out amongst the crowd? How do I meet my own needs while still people pleasing and taking care of the others? It's a very good chart for marital harmony, because that's a way, if they negotiate well, that they can meet the other's needs and get their needs met in a matrimony. So it's good for relationship in that way, if they're getting their needs met. But if they're overdoing the essence of Libra and giving to the other too much, let's say it's in Pisces, who already is the doormat, already is a sacrificial lamb, that's not going to be a good sun, because they're not going to have a boundary. They're going to be probably more codependent, and they're probably not going to get their needs met or have their own personal identity. So you have to start to see what sign it's in how they're how they're going to live that out. The sun in Aries, for instance, in the 7th is not going to like it there. And so what they might do is create violence or conflict or anger or fighting or aggression to say, I get to leave the house. I get to have a relationship. I get to have my own individual nature. So we start to see how they use the sign to create a boundary, a me aspect of the sun, so that they are not just merged into the whole relationship or the whole crowd. Similar in the 11th, but it's more palpable and more difficult in the 7th house. Similar to a sign that is Libra in the 1st. Libra, that is the sign of others and wants to be part of a group and a collective in the 1st. How do I honor others when all I'm thinking about is myself? So you start to see the question that their lifetime comes to solve, comes to integrate. The sun in the 8th. So here's a sun in the 8th. The sun in the 8th is always going to be about another person. I need someone to go to the bathroom with. I need someone to validate me. I need somebody to be a business partner. I need to have a sexual partner. I need to have somebody that is like accompanying me to fill in the blank. This is going to be a very difficult sign to have individuation. Very difficult. House. Now add Aries to that, a very individuated sign. Leo. And all of a sudden, this becomes very difficult. How do I maintain my own identity when I'm in a collective type of house? And it's not collective like Aquarius or Libra. It's collective in the sense that it's the other. It's the other's resources, the other's finances, the other's opinions. It's a house of the other. And so if I always need a shadow, something I've identified, not in every case, but it's one of these phenomenons I've picked up over years in practice. A lot of times people that have the sun in the 8th might have like a phantom death, a brother or sister that died right before they were conceived, or the parent had the loss or aborted or miscarriage and then had that child. There's like an aura of a phantom. In Spanish, we call it espíritu fantasma, I think is what it's called. There's another name. That's not the name I'm thinking of. And so the tendency of the person is I'm shopping for two. I'm always shopping for myself and this other soul that seems to be lingering. I've seen that quite a bit with this eighth house sun, especially if it's like Scorpio. That's like more death upon death. There's a lot of death in the chart. You'll see things like that. Someone that was a twin lost the second child and they were the only one that survived. That kind of phantom spirit, you see that quite a bit with people that have eighth house suns. But there's a need for the other to accompany, the other to give them validation. Now, if it's a sign like Libra that enjoys company or enjoys the other, it's fine. But in such an individuated house, it's difficult. A Leo sun in the 8th would be a very, very difficult placement. Why? Leo is the sun itself, wants to be the center of attention in the sky, and has very low self-esteem. And so now I'm supposed to shine and be my own individual person, but my psychology says I constantly need somebody to validate me. That's a very difficult space to integrate my own identity and confront my fears of being criticized or ridiculed. Leo suns tend by nature to have a superiority or an inferiority complex. So now if you're adding the layer that I need someone else to validate me, you can start to see the complication of the psychology. The 9th, personally, my favorite house is the 9th house sun. These people tend to live better abroad. And if they cannot live outside of the country, they oftentimes will marry someone that's from another country or culture. They read a lot, they travel a lot, they need to expand their horizons. That is the absolute seeker upon seeker archetype. It's very hard to get rooted, very hard to kind of bring them down to earth. But the sun, in my personal opinion, is the best sun of the zodiac. There is a Jesus archetype that happens with the sun in the ninth. I see it repeatedly in practice. People, the grandiosity, living out the Jesus story, that's a very, very common myth that person lives out. And so obviously bringing them down to some earthly, human, common existence is going to be important. The fire signs are obviously going to thrive in the ninth just because it's ruled by Sagittarius, and the air signs are going to thrive a lot in the ninth as well because of the intellect, the rational mind, the facts, the figures, the teachings, the higher university education, that kind of stuff. Water signs are not going to thrive in the ninth because if the ninth is abroad, the ninth is expanding horizons, and the water is all about protection, home, being safe. Suns in water don't like to be in that kind of house. The fire and the air houses like it a lot because they get to expand their mind and practice and study and show off and validate all their facts and knowledge and wisdom. So it's the philosopher's house. They're going to be a tendency to have a lot of open-mindedness or open conversation, open relationships. Don't tie me down. So water being so about and earth too, but the earth could create a structure, a safe environment abroad. Water is really the one that's going to reject being in the ninth. The 10th. So the sun in the 10th is your profession, your vocation, your persona, your public image are all tied into one. It's very important. I think it's part of why you study so much and why you've done so many things. And now you're kind of weaving this tapestry of your identity. That's part of the nature of the 10th house because it's your professional. It's where the sun was in the sky at noon. Let me bring up your chart. So you've got, I need to be a public image. It's part of the essence of the sun in the 10th. Part of it, I have to have a vocation. So it can't just be something that pays my bills, but it has to feed my soul. So you get that. A lot of times people that are suns in the 10th, they don't really feel that they've reached their success or they've made it until later in life. Because vocation tends to be something that's driven by the sun. So you might hop around and try different things, have all these different kind of jobs, maybe always leadership roles, maybe always jobs that pay the bills, that do well, that are successful. But the essence of the vocation and the profession, something that feeds your soul, usually comes later in life, post 40. So that's usually when you start to see these people really assume their power, assume their throne, speak from their soul, from their heart, find that thing that makes them tick later on after they've already tried a bunch of different hats professionally. Very much a position of leadership. So it's ironic because it's a Saturn ruled house, right? So it's a Capricornian ruled house, ambition, cutthroat, cold, but it's in Cancer, which is the opposite. So how do you enter an environment that's so limited, that's so structured, that's so like black and white, that's all money, and yet your Cancerian nature of protection, of nurturer, feels safe in like a cutthroat business world? That's part of how you're going to find your essence and your vocation. Now, you're lucky to have this black moon there to help you out. She is going to support that. It's cutthroat, you could be cutthroat too. You're not a pansy with black moon next to your sun. So she gives you that edge that naturally Cancer doesn't have. Cancer has a very passive aggressive edge. That's not what you want in the 10th house. The 10th house is very overt. So overt in terms of power, overt in going after what you want. Capricorn as a sign is very covert, but this helps you to really hold your own, have that edge in a space that's probably more cold, ambition oriented, not so soul oriented. So you have that in your favor. The sun in the 11th, my boys have this, is one of the best suns. It's actually the integration of the group, the collective, and my identity. It's a very different psychology than the sun in the 7th. With the exception of maybe a Libra, the sun in the 7th doesn't know how to be themselves amongst the others. However, the sun in the 7th, the collective takes care of the native. It is the sign, it is the placement of the sun where your friends are your closest. It's like having a family in your friends. Anytime you're part of the group takes care of the native. It's a very special placement. So in this case, it's the sun in Leo. There's a nature of individuation. There's a nature of identity that could be difficult to find among the collective because Leo and Aquarius are obviously square. I mean, opposites. But you find that the 11th house sun, the collective, the group takes care of its people. So if you're in the right group, your right friends. One of my early astrology teachers, she was sun in Scorpio in the 11th. And this woman got sick. She was in the hospital for like 80 days. And she only had one son who lived in another country and couldn't come to visit her in the States. That woman, that one day in the hospital, was left alone. There was always someone sitting watch by her bed. The collective, the group, took care of her. So it's one of those where you kind of put in and then you get out, but it's a very special placement of the sun. Now, people can go crazy. They can become, any ism. The 11th is any ism. So communism, socialism, any ism, any group that could be isolating. And obviously, depending on the sign and the aspects to the sun, you don't want someone to put themselves in exile or be so separate from reality. But the placement of the sun itself in the 11th is a very special placement. And then the sun in the 12th. The sun in the 12th hates to be in the 12th unless it's Pisces. Because if it's in Pisces, it can hide out. It can go to the bottom of the ocean and never be seen and pretend that it's floating into the cosmic consciousness and merged with the other, with the universal womb, and it never comes out of reality, into reality. But any other sign does not like to be in the 12th. It's the bottom of the ocean. You have to fight, similar to the 8th. You have to fight to have the sun shine. You have to fight to be seen. You have to fight to be noticed. You have to fight to come out of the underworld, so to speak, or the bottom of the ocean, the depths of the subconscious, to like take a breath. It's very exhausting for the native. Usually the sun in the 12th is similar to a balsamic moon. It could be the last incarnation in the cycle. It could be somebody that's here to experience a lot of loss and death. A lot of endings are associated with it. There's a tendency towards depression with the sun in the 12th. It's a very difficult placement. So this is Libra. This is my daughter's chart, actually. And so Libra, who likes to be social, who likes to be playful, who likes to be the center of attention, Miss Public Relations, Miss Social Butterfly, has to go down. This is one of the things that we've identified in her psyche. Once she has like 90% air. Once she's been social, she goes to the bottom of the ocean, refuge, 2-3 days in isolation, recovers, and then comes back out again. So that's something that she's learned to work in her life, that she needs that moment of introspection, of introversion, to be alone before she gives out. So you start to see the Libra and the Pisces, or the 12th house nature, start to work well together. So, so you're looking at it not only by house, which is going to be the focal point of the native's life. That's where they're going to live out most of their storyline, but it's going to be by sign and by house. And then we'll layer in level 2 the aspects. So if you have hard aspects or soft aspects, is going to see how much better the person lives out the energy and if it flows.
Yeah, my partner No, I was just, this is making sense. My partner's son is in the 12th house in Cancer with Saturn in Cancer in the
Oh,
12th
in the
house.
12th? Okay. Does he suffer from depression? Those are very depressive placements.
Yeah, and he's a Taurus moon in the 10th.
Okay, so that's going to be very difficult to get out of his own way.
Yeah.
Going to be very, very difficult. So you've got the Taurus moon, which I said last week is the hardest moon to change. So
Yep.
again, Taurus, Cancer, Virgo, those are going to be your most stuck in terms of the past and the brooding. And Saturn in the 12th, when we get there, but just so you know, Saturn in the 12th is somebody who has a persistent melancholy, a persistent negativity, a persistent sort of underlying depression. It doesn't mean that they have to be depressed crying on the couch, but they have this constant doom and gloom. Shit is just negative. They just have this energy that just lays on their energy body.
Yeah, he covers over it, right? Like there's an outward expression, but like there is definitely a felt sense of heaviness and lethargy and like, yeah, not really, not a lot of forward movement. Okay, in the physical, but like in the mental.
Yeah, mental, emotional. 12th is more
yeah.
mental, emotional. 6th is more physical. Even 2nd is more physical. 1st is more physical, but the 12th is much more mental, emotional. So this is where the myths really start to help if you layer. So with the myth of Pisces, right? Mom and son are running, they're getting chased. One person ends up in the heavens, mom ends up in the heavens as the divine mother, and the child stays stuck on earth. So part of the psychology of the 12th house sun is a part of me is separate from me. They could benefit from a soul retrieval, for instance, where the fragments that they feel have left them come back and become whole. But the psychology of the 12th house sun being a Pisces placement is a part of me is missing. So they don't feel whole, they don't feel complete. They often feel different. Now add the mythology of Capricorn, the Saturn, which is already sort of melancholic and and depressed. Saturn was dethroned. So now I'm not whole, plus I've been dethroned. Let me hide out in the bottom of the ocean so that nobody can harm me anymore, so that no one can dethrone me, so that no one can do anything to me. And then the nature of Cancer, passive aggressive, a little slighting, a little covert, a little manipulative, trying to get their needs met, using perhaps that emotional nature to be like manipulative. You start to see how the myths pile on one on top of the other.
Yeah,
fascinating.
About right.
It's fascinating. And then you go to the levels of consciousness, and for particular Cancer, right, you're looking at somebody who, a hermit crab, for instance, the 3rd level of consciousness. Outgrow that shell. Okay, things are negative. The world is unsafe. That all is true. Maybe there are aspects of you that's misunderstood. Okay, you confirm and validate to that person. But how can we, I like to say, how do we put breath into that thought? The limiting thought is, I'm different, I'm separate, no one loves me, people don't see me, I'm hiding out because I'm scared. Okay, how can we give that thought a new shell? That would be to raise consciousness. Okay, maybe if Saturn is the king, right, he was the throne, how can he find his throne in a group, in a specific group of people that are, let's say, depressed? He can lead a recovery group, or he can lead. That's how you start to raise consciousness, where the story doesn't change. You just find a way where they can excel within that environment. So that's when I really realized my 4th house. I've always worked from home. It was just sort of the way that my professional life and education worked out. Well, then I made my home beautiful, and I invited people in. Instead of isolating myself, I actually invite people here. And now I make the home the center, rather than being a protective mechanism that I'm afraid. I invite you into the home. So you start to see how you can add breath to the thought, or increase the consciousness around what that person views life to be. that's what we do with that, with the sun. And it oftentimes is after they've fallen a few times. It takes some age for us to really become strong enough to carry the chariot of our own power and vitality and strength. Any questions?
Nope.
Okay. Then thank you very much. And I will post this shortly, and Jen will send the link and I'll post it on the YouTube.
All right.
And then let
Thanks
me
a
know
lot.
your birthday and we will hang out.
Okay, sounds good, Francis. Thank
Have
you.
a good day. Bye.
You too. Bye.